What I want to do with you guys here on Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday is revisit the real legacy of the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, oftentimes you'll hear Republicans say, he was a Republican. And you'll hear the military say that, oh, he would have wanted to increase defense spending nowadays. That's actually what the Air Force said last year on his holiday. And a Pentagon lawyer said the same thing the year before, that, oh, he would be in favor of the war in Iraq and war in Afghanistan. So oftentimes what they try to do is hijack his legacy or try to sanitize his legacy to make it seem like he's not this great, strong progressive that he's always been. So I want to give you some quotes to remember him in context, because not only was he a great man on the defining issue of his legacy, which is equality for all people, equal protection under the law, he was also great in virtually every other political topic. It's amazing how ahead of his time he was. He really was such a great human being. He's one of my heroes. So he said, quote, "Everyone knows that the labor movement did not diminish the strength of the nation, but enlarged it by raising the living standards of millions." So he was a strong supporter and a leader in the union movement. Quote, "Our needs are identical with labor's needs. We want decent wages, fair working conditions. I do not speak for Negro workers only. A living wage should be the right of all working Americans." Man, here he is in the 60s arguing for a living wage. I mean, today you don't even see all that many people arguing for a living wage. Just the so-called fringe progressive outlets like, us, the Young Turks, Tom Hartman, we're the only ones that are out here like, why are you debating raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour? A living wage is at least $12. If you're not going to raise it to at least $12, you're wasting our fucking time here. Let's go. Living wage. This isn't that difficult. If you work a full-time job, you should be able to pay the bills, take care of the kids, put food in their stomachs, take care of the rent. But we don't even have a conversation about that nowadays. He was on top of this in the 1960s, leading the fight. He said, quote, "The Republican Party geared its appeal and program to racism, reaction, and extremism. All people of goodwill viewed with alarm and concern the frenzied wedding at the Cow Palace of the KKK with the radical right." So he went after, racists in the Republican Party, and he really called them out for what they were. Now, to be fair, at the time, there was no party that was just a flat-out defender of black people. It was mixed. There was a time, in fact, when the parties switched and the Republicans were the more liberal party and then they had become the more conservative party later on. So it was a weird time in American politics. But he doesn't bite his tongue in calling out the crazy people when he sees the crazy people. And also that goes to debunk the myth that he was a Republican himself. Do you want me to read the quote again? He very harshly characterized them as reactionary extremists and racists. He also said, quote, "There is nothing except a tragic death to prevent us from reordering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war." Now, Martin Luther King Jr., another area where he was just so far ahead of everybody else, was that he held strong to this principle of, wow, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Why, since World War II, have we been attacking fucking every place on Earth and, invading all these South American countries and overthrowing their democratically elected governments and putting in dictators? Why the fuck are we in Vietnam fighting communism? What has a little Vietnamese boy ever done to me, ever done to any American? This doesn't make any sense. Why are we using our troops? There's no threat of imminent attack against the nation. What, are you really trying to make the case that the communist Vietnamese are going to be knocking down the door in Missouri if we don't invade there? Are you really that stupid? It doesn't make any sense. The only time you should use the American military is if we are about to get attacked. If it's imminent attack, then yes, you defend yourself. And if not, then I don't know what you're doing. You're not making any sense. Why aren't you fighting for peace? Peace is the thing that actually matters here, not random wars like we're fighting in right now. He said, quote, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." So he looked at the military spending back then and said, this is insanity. How can we spend more invading other countries, spend more on bombs and tanks and fighter jets and all this garbage when we got kids starving here at home? We got people without health care. You know, we're not lifting people out of poverty. We're not offering a living wage. What are we doing? Well, look at our priorities. They don't make any sense. You want to try to liberate a different country? How about we liberate our own freaking country? You don't make any sense. What are you talking about? I mean, clearly, to spend more elsewhere when we got things to worry about here, and we got a grotesque living situation here, I mean, that's beyond stupid. He also said, quote, "The greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is my own government." Now, that is not something that you hear talked about often, a quote like that. How would Fox News put that quote through the ringer in 2014 America? I mean, just think about what, Reverend Wright. Reverend Wright had very similar comments. He was un-American, unpatriotic President Obama, or candidate Obama at the time. Do you denounce him? Do you denounce and reject him? You don't think Rush Limbaugh, you don't think Bill O'Reilly would take this quote and tarnish it and call MLK unpatriotic? You don't think they would say, he's anti-American because he doesn't want us to invade everywhere? That's exactly what they would do. We all know that's what they would do. Now, I have a few more here before I go on to more stuff about MLK. Quote, "I have always been deeply interested in and sympathetic with the total work of the Planned Parenthood Federation." Very supportive of Planned Parenthood, family planning, contraception. Quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane." Again, way ahead of his time, calling for a universal healthcare system back then. Again, it's amazing. This is why this guy is a hero to me. Not only did he believe these things, not only did he stand on principle, not only did he know how to fight for them in a peaceful way, but he also, he was one of the most charismatic people I've ever seen in my life. Like, when he gives a speech, it touches on something, within all rational human beings, that it just inspires you. It makes you want to, go march alongside him and actually work towards the common goal. And finally, he pushed for the Poor People's Campaign and an Economic and Social Bill of Rights, which pushed for, quote, "the right of every citizen to a minimum income," and, quote, "the right to an adequate education." So here he is. He called for a minimum basic income. He called for universal education, universal health care, equality for all, and the rampant militarism and imperialism of America. We shouldn't only focus on the things that have been pre-approved by the status quo and the establishment and the powers that be. We shouldn't only focus on the one little soundbite of the "I have a dream" speech. We should focus on the total picture here with Martin Luther King Jr.